Good evening and welcome. My name is Pamela and I am the team lead on the helpline. Pleo is very excited to be working in collaboration with Queer Connection Lanark to bring you this webinar called Call Me Who I Am, a conversation with Elizabeth and Erin. A few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Pleo website. Please keep your microphone muted unless you are asking a question. Elizabeth and Erin encourage you to ask any questions you may have during the conversation. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand or you can type your question in the chat. To begin, I would like to call upon my colleague Lynn, who is a family peer supporter and one of Pleo's support group facilitators, to read the land acknowledgement and introduce one of our speakers.
Well, hello. Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. So we will begin this support group by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We recognize the history, strength, and diversity of Canada's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. We are committed to engaging respectfully with Indigenous children, young people, and families within and across nations in what is known as Ontario. We must also commit to recognizing and valuing the experience and wisdom of Indigenous peoples as it relates to our specific work with mental health and families. So our first presenter is Elizabeth Snyder. Came out as a lesbian 45 years ago and has lived as an out lesbian all those years, out to her family, neighbors, friends, co-workers, and bosses. Since coming out, Elizabeth has worked to bring about social change through spearheading various initiatives both in Northern BC and Eastern Ontario. She represents Queer Connection Lanark on a number of advisory groups, supporting diversity, equity, inclusion, and ensuring about the 2SL LGBTQI plus visibility. Over to you, Pamela.
Thank you, Lynn. And now I would like to introduce our second speaker, Erin Lee. Erin is a member of the queer community and an active member of Queer Connection Lanark, as well as Mississippi Mills Pride. With a blended, diverse family, Erin is mom to 5, 2 of whom are also members of the queer community. Erin and her late partner, Deborah, believes in the right to be and advocates for queer rights and increased visibility of the 2SL LGBTQIA+ community. Currently, Erin is the Executive Director of Lanark County Interval Health and Community Support, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan member, Coordinating Community member, and member of the Victimology Advisory of Algonquin College. Erin's advocacy is characterized as solution-focused, mentoring to new advocates, and inclusive to all. So before we dive into the discussion today, I invite you all to write into the chat the age of the youth or child who identifies as 2SL LGBTQ+ that you'll hear about this evening. And perhaps if you feel like sharing as well in the chat, one challenge or concern that you bring with you this evening that you would like addressed.
Thank you for the warm introductions, and thank you everybody for finding time in your evening to join us. I'm Erin, and the pronouns that I use are she and her, and I am happy to be joining my friend and colleague Elizabeth this evening to share a little bit about our stories and to hear a little bit about your stories together collectively this evening. Elizabeth?
All right, well, thank you for spending your valuable time with us. I have a quote that I want to share with you that gives me strength. There are times when you must speak, not because you're going to change the person, because if you don't speak, they have changed you. So that speaks to the core of who we are, and we don't want to be changed. And so find your voice. And after this, maybe you might find your voice for your child. I noticed that Erin had said her pronouns. I struggle with pronouns, um, more because um, when I was growing up, it was more about women's rights and women not being able to have a job, not being able to sign a mortgage on their house without their husband. So that was the struggle for me. So I prefer not to use pronouns, but I say I absolutely will honor whatever pronouns people tell me. So as you can see, there's a difference, and this is about respecting each other and hearing each other and hearing their journeys and who they are. And the title, which Erin came up with, is Call Me Who I Am. And that's what this is about, is seeing your child and recognizing who they are. Erin?
I appreciate that, Elizabeth, and I appreciate that pronouns are a struggle, and we're going to talk about pronouns. But we want to always start off with a kind of um, positive mantra of how we can approach the ever evolving diversity of our kids and our communities. And the first thing we always want to do is let you know, as parents and caregivers and those who love their children, that this notion of I worry if I am supporting my child adequately, I'm worried about what do I say, what do I do. The first thing we want you to hear is you're already doing something right. You're already doing something right because your child has identified to you, I don't want to be called he anymore. I want to be called they. I find myself struggling and I don't feel comfortable in the clothes that seem scripted for what I'm supposed to wear, given who I'm supposed to be. And you're already hearing those things and responding to them. So you're already doing a really great job because your kid trusted you with their information and with identifying to you what's going on for them. So I want you to just think about reframing the fact that we often get down on ourselves as parents about what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong and how we're negatively impacting our kids. I also want you to reframe that to think about I have a courageous kid. I have nurtured that, and my kid has been able to entrust me with some information about who they are and how they identify. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong thing, but my kid trusted me by sharing who they were. How they identify and what works for them. And it is important that against all odds, they've come to you. They have not allowed themselves to be silenced, and so they've come to you. And yesterday in the webinar, I really felt like I waited too long to say um, that when we worry about our kids in terms of how they identify and how they're evolving, we worry about the natural things like mental health, and we think about how is this impacting my kid's mental health. And it is important that you know that mental health is everybody's reality, and mental health for queer kids and queer youth and queer people is something that we always have to be mindful of, and we need to always be checking in. And we need to think about how we see and how we check in, right? What are those patterns? What are the changes in patterns? How is their behavior changing? How are their marks changing at school? How are their interactions or their friends group changing? What are, maybe they're isolating more at home and they're more quiet. When you see those changes in patterns of behavior and they're concerning to you, it is important to voice that concern and to voice that in the most respectful way possible. Hey, what's up? I see that, things are changing. What's that all about? Are you feeling uncomfortable? And get into that whole notion of we want to raise our kids to be all of who they are, but we want them to remain intact, their self-esteem intact, their worthiness and their value intact. So we do have to take risks sometimes and start those challenging questions, especially when it relates and how it relates to mental health. I see shaking of
I
heads,
just
so
want to
I'm seeing that you can relate to that. Sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
no. I just want to reiterate what Aaron said about your child. And against all odds, like Aaron said, your child spoke to you and revealed something about themselves that they've been thinking about. And which is, oh, it's such a bonus. You should see that moment as, okay, I have a strong child who reached out to me and was willing to reach out to me. And see that child as being courageous and acknowledge to that child, your child, that you have a lot of courage to tell me that. And now let's work together to make sure you're going to be safe and work together. Like Aaron said, we don't know everything. And so working in partnership with the child will build that resilience. And that's the next step of ensuring that your child will be safe and bloom and have a wonderful, authentic life. And the other thing is that it's not about you. It's about the relationship you have with your child. So things are going on in your mind as your child says, whatever, I'm non-binary, or I think I might be a girl, or I think I might be a boy, or I think I might be a lesbian or gay. Take a breath, because your child is watching. And this is the moment your child will remember how you deal with this incredible information. And be honest. I don't know the words yet, but I will learn them. And we'll do this together.
I
Aaron?
want to acknowledge that I have one child who identifies as a lesbian. I probably knew that she was a lesbian before she knew that she was a lesbian. I didn't influence her being. I allowed her to grow and be all who she was. And then she came out as a lesbian and was embraced by her family and there were no issues. I have another child who was born a girl and at a certain age decided that they were now non-binary and would like us to use pronouns they and them. When you raise a child who was born a girl and then all of a sudden they say, I am non-binary and I now want to have you use pronouns they, them, uh, you're going to make mistakes. And so we embraced, okay, yeah, we totally get that. Can you help us understand what that means for you? Does that mean that you prefer women? Does that really, like, what does it all mean? And we had a conversation and we said, we are going to respect that you are now they, them, and we are going to make mistakes. And I'm going to slip up and I'm going to say she, and I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to remember, but I'm going to get there. And it's just going to take me a while, but I completely respect that. And my mother, who is significantly older than me, struggles with they, them. So when I say they're coming over for dinner, my mother says, who? And I say, Leah. And my mother says, and who else? And I say, no, just Leah. Well, that doesn't make sense. You said they. And I said, yes. And so we can't let people get caught up in the grammatical incorrectness of using they, them, and referring to one person, right? We have to help people grow through it. And we're going to laugh through it and we're going to, say this is not grade 4, Mom. We're not worried about whether grammatically it's correct. What we're worrying about is making sure that Leah feels included and respected and accepted for their chosen pronouns. And pronouns are really important, and I respect that there are lots of people who don't choose to use pronouns like Elizabeth does, but they're a fundamental way right now in the world that we live in to affirm and to
Yes.
respect an individual's gender identity. Right? It's about creating that space. It's affirming. It's, yeah, like I hear you and I respect who you are. It's fostering this notion of inclusivity, right? So we're not just going to, so for instance, when Leah became what we first knew as an auntie and then decided that they were now non-binary and they're they them. So then I'm like, oh, what does that mean? Are you anti or not anti? And do we need to find a new term for that? Like, is there a new term for that? And so Leah had to think that through, and Leah decided I'm still going to be anti because I want Nico and Gibson to both call me the same thing. And so we foster that inclusivity that that's cool. If that's the choice you're making, that's what we want you to do. We want it also speaks to people's mental health. When we're making efforts to use their chosen pronouns, it really does show that because misgendering negatively affects people, right? And as soon as you are misgendered, like you don't feel accepted, you don't feel heard, you don't feel seen and visible, and it affects your mental health. Or if your family member makes excuses, your family member says, "Oh yeah, 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 they're they them today. It's a phase. They're just going through something." You automatically devalue their existence, and it negatively impacts people's mental health. We have to move but beyond assumptions, right? It used to be you see somebody in a dress and you make certain assumptions. You see somebody, wearing, I don't know, jeans and a hoodie, you make a certain assumption. We have to move beyond assumptions now. We have to ask the question. So when you meet somebody new, it's important to say, "Hi, I'm Erin. My pronouns are she, her," or if you're meeting someone, you're talking to them and you say she and they say they, then you need to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I should have asked what your pronouns were or what chosen pronouns you have." And so I know I might be belaboring the point around pronouns, but pronouns are the way that people share their identity. And it's how they enter a room or a conversation or a classroom or anything. It's how they enter. And so if we can't get our heads around how we make people invisible when we don't acknowledge their chosen pronouns, then how do we become their advocate? How do they trust us with their struggles? How do we become their champion at school when they have issues with bathrooms? How do we engage in that when we devalue and not use people's pronouns? It's a show of support, right? If I simply use the right pronouns or somebody misgenders one of my kids, I say, "Oh, you meant they, them. You meant them." And so I become the advocate. So you don't have to carry that load all by yourself. We can carry that load together and it can be shared, and you have a parent who's going to support you and use that language. Is that making sense? Does it resonate for people? Is it making sense? Thank you, Nicholas. I have seen you're nodding, and that's very helpful. I hope for the others that this is resonating and making sense to you. And please write things in the chat if we're headed in a direction that you can't relate to, or you have a challenge with that, because that's what we're here for, right? Is to support each other as parents and as people in community. Elizabeth, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wondered if you could talk about your experience with your mom when you came out to your mom and how your mom had worried that she might have failed you.
Yeah. Yes. I came out when I was 27. I was going to university on the West Coast. My mom lived in Halifax, and I called her on the phone. I said, "I think I might be a lesbian." I used the word might. I wasn't committing myself yet. Um, and she was worried for my safety. She didn't want me to tell anybody. Um, one, maybe hoping that I might change my mind, that it was a phase. The other thing was too that she asked me further on in the conversation, she asked me if it was something she did wrong. And looking back now as an adult, I really, that took a lot of guts for her to ask me that question. And at the moment, I said, "Oh, no, Mom, I came from a very loving family. Um, but that may be something that you folks may feel is that guilt. Oh, if only I had not given child a doll, or if only I had not given the truck or the gun or whatever, right? You're going to twist yourself up and tie yourself in that stress moment. You have to let it go. It's not about you, it's about your child and your relationship with your child. So, taking the time, get yourself out of the picture. At some point, you will need support just to talk about other parents about, well, what about? Well, what about? You know, and your child may not be able to answer all those questions you may have. Um, but at that moment, it's important that you take the time to see your child, and a courageous child, like I said, against all odds, all the socialization, because their socialization happens through TV, through friends. Oh, you can't be played that, or boys don't cry, or whatever. Against all socializations, your child found themselves. They knew something wasn't quite fitting, and they were trying to find the words, and they finally found the words to tell you, this is who I am. So with pronouns, practice, 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 practice. And you will make mistakes. And I remember QCL did a film, and one of the interviewees so very eloquently talked about one person picking it up and in a situation, and then other people began to pick it up. So you are the role model, and you are the role model for your other children or your friends or your partner. They will get it, and your child will see that you are trying, and that's all they want to see, is that you heard them. And by you verbally saying these things, they know that you heard them. So
And my coming
I
out
want to
was,
talk about, go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
I just want to say my coming out was really different because I just want to mention the fact that if you look at me, you'll probably think she comes from something, but what is she? I'm a biracial woman, and my dad's Chinese and my mom's white, and it was an experiment, and this is just what I look like. And when I came out, um, all of the issues and realities around intersections were like all like around me, right? So the intersectionality of culture, of tradition, of faith, of all of those things. So the last person I wanted to come out to was my dad, because I was so afraid that I would be a disappointment to my dad. So I came out to everybody else, and shockingly, to be honest, my mom didn't manage it as well as my dad did. So when I went to my dad said, "Are you being loved? Yes. Are you loving? Yes. Are you being hurt? No. Do you think you're doing something wrong? No. Then why would I be disappointed?" I want you to be happy. I want you to be loved. I want you to love. I want you to be healthy. And I think I cried for a solid 20 minutes because all of the shit that I created that. Right? I created that. Community created that. Social media created that. Influences created that. I allowed myself to create. My dad is not going to accept me. My dad is not going to embrace me, and I'm going to be a disappointment to my dad. And my dad was the most supportive dad, and really got it. He didn't gossip about it. He didn't. He was the guy who used to make bad statements about, oh, your cousin Sharon, she flies both ways. And I'd be like, what's that mean, Dad? Because my dad was from the generation, he did not want to say the word lesbian. He did not want to say bisexual, like the language was contrary to him. And I said, and just FYI, if flying both ways means that she's bisexual, just so you know, she doesn't fly both ways. She's a lesbian, Dad. Right. And so then we started to challenge each other and have conversations because he was able to be accepting of me as his child and didn't love me any differently. In fact, I think that he just thought I was brave, and that I was silly for thinking that I had to hide, as a guy who lived through racism and married a white woman, and in a time where it was contrary to do that, and raised these three kids who all look like something but not really sure what, that I didn't trust him with all of who I was, right? Was a disappointment. So it is important to recognize that the intersections of culture, religion, tradition, those things are a reality, right? And so, it's contrary to my faith, for my kid to be queer. Yeah, faith is contrary in many ways for us, right? We struggle with our faith throughout our whole life. We don't all ascribe to being the best of the best of the best. And whatever book we read, whether it's the Quran or the Torah or whatever and whoever we see as our Almighty, at the end of the day, isn't the relationship about me with the Almighty, in terms of what happens to me and my destiny? It's very hard when we get embroiled in it's contrary to my faith or my culture or my tradition. It's really important to look at what is conflicting us around being able to support our kids to be all of who they can be, and how do we talk about it so that we can come to a place where we can feel comfortable embracing our kids contrary to faith and culture and tradition, and knowing that things do change and parents evolve and people evolve and culture evolves. And so we have to redefine what does family look like, who are our members, and who's going to be able to support our family through this process of being and coming into being and being okay with that. I'm not going to suggest that it's easy. It's not easy. And in 65 countries in the world, it's still illegal to be queer. So I'm not suggesting it's easy, but I'm suggesting that it's doable. And that when we lean on things like faith and culture and tradition, we eliminate the possibilities of keeping things open as they evolve. And that's when we're going to see kids shut down and not engage with us. And I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I went into the intersectionality pieces and my coming out, and I think I cut you off because I think my internet might be a little bit delayed tonight. So I'll turn it back over to you, Elizabeth.
No, it's fine, Aaron. I'm going to take on what you said, and everybody wants their child to be happy. And that's the goal. So how to be the champion for your child, for them to be happy. And you can start small. Start within your household. Put something up in the fridge. Talk to your child about what they see as the plan. What would they like to have happen, knowing that their big secret is no longer a secret? Acknowledge that they have told you something that they've been hiding, and how brave it is for them to trust this moment. So put something up in the fridge if that's what the child wants, or they could have something in their room, on their door, affirming who they are, that gives them strength every day to go to school. Or maybe they might have a button that they could put in their jacket that maybe is not visible, but is visible to them, like a talisman that they can hold on to, that gets them through the day when they may face some bullies. You should check out on Google about resilience, because we all need resilience. Resilience is the courage to keep going after failures, finding strength, finding a way to problem solve. Problem solve with your child. They have incredible insight as to what would work for them. But also that moment where you are problem solving, you are developing a different type of relationship with them, which then helps with resilience. They are seeing you model resilience, so that when they go out into the world and meet their friends and something happens, they will come back and talk to you about it, and you will problem solve together. I remember growing up, and I'm a very tall woman, almost 6 feet, and I have short hair. And growing up, I got misgendered a lot in going into bathrooms, and I twisted myself to conform. So that was the point where you could dye your eyelashes, because I was wearing mascara and makeup and high heels and nylons and a lot of earrings, because at that point males weren't wearing earrings. And growing my hair longer and doing everything. And then I was in Canadian Tire, and there at the cashier was a male person, and he had on earrings. And I began to realize that trappings were for everybody, and no longer were they going to be identifying me, helping me to identify as female. So when I began to realize that, I put on jeans, no longer wore makeup, and anyways, so
Yeah, I
you
mean,
want you want your child to be who they are, however they present. And you want them to be in an environment where that is encouraged. Because in the end, when you encourage your child, you will have a strong, happy child who will tell you things, and you need to hear things from that child. So they will come home and tell you, this is what happened in the bathroom today. This is what the teacher did. I think we need to work together. I think I would like you to talk to the principal, or I can talk to the principal, whatever. It's about that relationship with your child.
and
Aaron?
it's really important to know that we're learning new language. And so we are all learning new language. And, even if you're a member of the queer community, you may not know what pansexual means. You may not know. And so these terms, they just kind of arrive, and they arrive quickly, and you're flustered because you don't know what those things are. I asked my kid a question about what being a gold star lesbian, and I had no idea that it was offensive, that she took it in an offensive way. And a gold star lesbian is a lesbian who's never been with anybody except another woman. And I thought, like, that's probably a cool thing, but clearly I was wrong. And my child is now 31 years old, married to a woman and has a child. So I still am learning and making mistakes. And then I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was offensive. Oh, okay, like let's talk that through. And she was more offended by the fact that she thinks her mom is very woke, and would have known that, right? So that I'm like, well, I'm woke except for when I'm not, so we need permission, no matter how old our kids are, no matter how old we are. None of us know everything. We're all learning a new language. So, we know that now that it's not okay to say tranny, like that it's offensive. It's much like terminology when you think about race, right? There were terms when I was a kid that people would use to reference me. So people would call me a wink because I was part white and part Chinese. My response to that was violence, right? I would just hit them because I didn't know what else to do because I wasn't skilled yet. But then I got the skills and I started to use my words to defend and honor who I was. And that's what happens. And the fear that parents carry, you need to acknowledge that fear because that kid was born and you started fretting and being fearful. Will they be loved? Will they be smart? Will they be successful? Will they have a family? Will they, right? And so you're already fearful. So it's okay. This is another part of our fear base. And why does it have to be strange and weird and wrong? It's just another way to be worried about and fearful for your kids. And guess what? It's okay because the world is not screaming out there, hey, it's okay to be queer. Come and be queer and acknowledge that. People are not out there. Some of us are out there doing that, but not everybody is as receptive, right? So thinking about those fears that you have for your child are really, really important and need to really be validated, and to know you're not alone. To know that as a parent whose kid is questioning, that's a very healthy place to be. How do we engage in questioning conversations? Like, how do we make it okay? Just like when someone says, how come the boys play on that hockey team and the girls play on these hockey teams? I don't want to be on a team with everybody who's just either a girl or a boy. We have those conversations now, right? Because we've come a long way and we can talk about mixed teams and we can talk about all of these stereotypes about girl skills and girls' values and boys' skills and boys' values and all of that stuff. Well, why can't we do that when it comes to being gender affirming, when we're talking about preferences and love? We should be able to talk about, people being able to love each other and without threat of violence or fear, that's healthy. Not about what gender that person is in terms of you having a love feeling, and being able to respect that not everybody will respond to your love feeling the same way. That's how we become the advocate. That's how we challenge the bathroom rules. That's how we hear about misgendering and talking about those things. But thinking about self-harm, thinking about mental health, thinking about suicide, and the things you read and the things you know about, trans folks and the higher rates of suicide in transgender community. Well, that's not a lie. Uh, that is truth. But when you dig into more deeply, trend rates of suicide, you will hear the stories of trauma and hate and being disowned and being alone and all of those things. You will hear about the violence on the streets that people endure and experience. So that augments our fear, right? And then we see the graffiti about, hate speech and those things, and it augments our fear. But we need to unpack that fear and not go in already fearful, like full on feared and need to have a cape on. We need to actually be realistic in that, right? If our kids are being nurtured and are being free and being loved through the whole process, then at the end, if the goal is keep our kids worthy, make sure they know their value, make sure that they graduate high school with their self-esteem intact, then we're going to focus on those things and we're going to get through it, right? And we're going to nurture all of that. And we're going to have to pause every once in a while and pause and recognize I am not perfect. I am not the perfect parent. I am doing my best. Oh my gosh, I don't know what my best looks like anymore. It's okay. Lean into that. It's always the most uncomfortable edge that you would get to that helps you transition to do better things, right? Live on those edges a little bit. Know that you're not alone and know that there's a community of people. Reach out to people. There are queer groups and counseling supports and supports for parents and PFLAG, all kinds of stuff out there. If you need a resource or you need a support to get more information because you're really struggling and you don't know what cisgender means, and you don't want to tell anybody you don't know, you're going to look it up. You might get more confused, and then ask somebody, and look at the resource, because honestly, the spirit of being able to say the things we say to our kids, we want you to be anything you want to be. There is nothing you can't be. There's nothing you can't do. All of those messages we give when our kids are little should include and must include your identity, your course of love. All of those things must be included. Otherwise, we're just being hypocritical. We want you to be healthy. We want you to be happy, but only the way that we want you to be happy, right? Only the way that the world accepts you happy. That's not cool, right? We have to challenge ourselves in terms of those views and how we open the world to welcome and embrace our kids. Instead of, I want you to love, but just the way that I'm teaching you to love, not the way that it seems like you're loving. That's just hypocritical. It's not going to create kids that have their self-esteem intact, right? I know I go on about some things, but I do think that it is important that parents build strategies around their advocacy. If your child was being treated poorly at school because they didn't have healthy lunches, you would do something. If your kid was being bullied because they didn't have all the newest clothes for the first day of school, you would do something. So if your kid is being bullied because they identify as she and their name is Brandon and they now want to be called Brandy, then we should be able to figure out how do we advocate for that acceptance, right? And that embracing of that. We need to be our kids' best advocates because they need us in every aspect. And then parents need to be able to say, "Oh my God, this is so hard. This is so hard. Sometimes I just wish that they would just come home and be what other kids are supposed to be. Why does this happen to me?" Join those groups, talk to people. Like Elizabeth and I are always available. Elizabeth is more available than me and she's nicer than me. But like, let's have the conversation. Let's break the tension and let's be able to say, like, what do you mean you think that? Sylvie, what are you talking about? Like, let's unpack that a little bit, because how is that different than a kid being bullied because they don't have the newest Nikes? Like, it's just not right. Anyway, stop me, Elizabeth. Stop me from ranting about these things.
Okay. Talking about biases and talking about your dreams for your children. And of course, you have dreams for your kids. And all of a sudden, things shifted. And how you pivot, and it is about pivoting, is building in your support team around you, whether it's a partner or whether it's someone, a neighbor you go out for coffee with. You won't believe what just happened. I need someone I can talk to who won't judge any of this. Find that person. You know that person already. And maybe your child can't talk to you, but maybe your child has a favorite aunt that they can talk to. Don't get your ego in the way here because you think that being a parent, well, they should be able to talk to me. Step aside. If the child said, and if you know who your child has a relationship with, who they are honest with, suggest maybe they come over and have that conversation. And you may be included, or you may not be. But at some point you will be. So make room for someone else being the key person in that relationship. Like I said, it's not about you. It's about the relationship with your child, and someone else may fill that role. It may be a coach, it may be a teacher, who knows? Or it may be the kid down the street that comes over. And you may inadvertently become the household that kids come to. Because if your child is thriving, your child will be a magnet to other kids. And your child may invite their classmate or a friend come over. Wonderful. You know where they are, and pat yourself on the back if that begins to happen, because you have done something well there. Your child has reached out and has formed a community which is about resilience. Having that support network around you when times get tough, that builds resilience. And that's what you're going to be modeling for your child. So who cares if you don't know the names? You'll learn the names. As the gay community is ever evolving. And you know what? We live in an amazing community, the queer community, because the tent is so big, and it's always adding on to it, which is wonderful. But I have no idea of the names of what people are calling themselves. But for me, I don't care. If it's important to them, they'll tell me. But I look at the quality of their soul. That's what and if they're happy, I don't care what they call themselves. If go ahead, Aaron.
I just want to say that one of the things that I want you to realize is that as parents, when there's a problem or our child is upset, what is it that we want to do? We want to fix it. That's all we want to do is fix it. And we are all fixers. And you can challenge me on that, but I'm just telling you, we're all fixers. We want to make it better. And it is the hardest thing to do is to resist the fixing
Yes.
because they're not broken. Right? There's nothing for you to fix. If you want to fix something, we need to fix the world outside, but
Yes.
they're not broken, right? So just recognize as a parent to think about your own self-care, to think about your own emotions related to who your child or your youth person is evolving into, and figure out how to be proud of that, right? Because it's not about fixing it. Right. The fixing is fix the damn bathroom policies at schools. The fixing is, the fact that we have a boys section and a girls section in a store instead of having a clothing section in a store, right? It's about fixing the outside. It's not always about fixing our kids. And actually, in fact, it's rarely about fixing our kids. So I just wanted to make sure that I looked at the clock and I'm like, it's 7:20, and I want to make sure that the parents on this call hear it loud and clear that, it's so hard because we just want to fix it and make it better. We don't want them to cry about the way that somebody treated them or talked to them. We need to empower them with, how do I speak back to that? How do I respond to that? How do I say, no, thank you? You can keep that language to yourself, or how do I clarify? I am they, them, because that is my right to choose. How do we empower our kids to also respect other kids? How do we fix the dynamic in our family when two of our kids don't understand why the other kid is now identifying differently and are struggling with you? We really can't I can't emphasize anymore how difficult it is to, as a fixer, to want to fix those things for my kids. And some things we can't fix, some things we got to go through with them. And that's the part about the resiliency, and that's the about empowerment, and that's about meeting the issues head on, right? Not burying them so they become a heavy mental health issue, but meeting those issues where those issues are. Again, right? Am I just going to say keeping our kids' self-esteem intact one more time? Because in terms of them being successful and happy adults, we want our kids to keep their self-esteem intact and to understand their worth and their value. And all of these contribute, and they will emerge stronger and they will emerge wiser. When my son was in daycare, they said that he said something about Angie and Laura being gay. And the daycare provider said, "Oh, they're happy." And then he said, "No, they're gay." And she said, "Yeah, like gay people, like when you're gay, you're very, very happy." And he was so upset because he felt she didn't understand him. And then she had to come and talk to me about my son using the word gay. And I'm like, "Oh." And I said, "Well, he knows gay people. We have like we're queer positive people." And she said, "Well, I told him gay is happy." And I said, "What did he say?" And he said, "No, Angie and Laura love each other and they're gay." And I said, "You can't minimize that, right?" So eventually he didn't go to that daycare anymore because there wasn't going to be a shift, and he wasn't going to be able to express his understanding, which was accurate, without being compromised, because he's told it's wrong, right? No, we don't talk like that. Gay is happy and proud. No, that's not what gay means, right? So we can't fix our kids because they're not broken. So I want parents to hear us in the sense that it's not easy. Mental health is for real. Fear is constant for parents. They learn to drive. We're fearful. We're fearful for ourselves too when they learn to drive. We have to acknowledge those things. But there are lots of things that we go through as parents. But that whole piece around resilience and empowerment, and really having heart-to-heart conversations and acknowledging the mistakes, that we make day to day, is really, really going to provide that support to your kids to be fluid, to be whomever they may need to be, and the change. Because we had a group, Elizabeth, if you remember, we had a group, and some kids came, some youth, and they identify as one name that time. And then the next time they identified in another name. And there was this Grandpa Jim. He was our colleague and our friend, and he has since passed away. And he said, "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you are. I don't know how you call yourself, but I'm just glad you're here." Right. And that was, and I think some of us were like, "Oh no, like this is going to be bad. He should be saying those things." But he was honestly, authentically himself. And all the youth accepted that because he said, "I don't care about all of those things. I'm just so happy you're here." And that's the message they kept. And that was the important piece for them. So I know we're heading into our last 5 minutes, and I know there hasn't been as much chatter in the chat as there was in our previous webinar. But where are folks at? Like, is this kind of a helpful conversation to have, or not conversation because you didn't really share too much with us, but was it helpful to have us talking casually about these things? Is it something that would be helpful to do more of? Like, what are your thoughts and feelings as you know, give gratitude that it was over in 5 minutes? Where are we at? Sylvie, thank you, Erin and Elizabeth. Lots to keep in mind as we support our 22-year-old trans son. 100% Sylvie.
I want to, Sylvia, yes, I want to just talk about another way you can champion your child. And I'll give an example. A friend, trans, has a trans daughter, and the friend was picking up the grandfather at the airport. And it's about an hour drive. And the grandfather hadn't yet met the granddaughter. And so the friend was saying to her father, "You can ask me anything you want, anything, but don't ask your granddaughter." And so they spent an hour in the car talking, and he was free to ask any questions. When they arrived home and the granddaughter came down the stairs, he said, "Her name, nice to meet you." That's how you can be a champion. You can run interference, as simple as that. But provide an opportunity for people to ask the questions, but have an invisible boundary around your child to protect them. Erin and I are perfect examples of coming through the system. We are so healthy. We are so proud. We are living our best lives because we found ourselves and we spoke about ourselves and we are true to ourselves. So that's what you want for your child. You want your child to be happy.
I just want to reflect on the comments in the chat. Sylvie, I
Sure.
think that, working with the transgender community is super important. And I also want to say that there is a parents support group that Elizabeth and another woman we know in Elmont, Ontario, created a kind of a support network for parents of transgender kids in our local community. It's happening, like when I say it's happening, gatherings and supporting parents of transgender kids is happening all over the place, and it's really, really important. And if you live in Ottawa, for sure, there's lots of supports going on, and Family Services à la Famille Ottawa has a trans inclusive group and stuff. So it's really, really important to be connected in community. And also, Nicholas, I just want to say, like, I really appreciate you outing yourself in terms of your own identity. And I 100% agree with you that we have to help others, develop their skills, because I think that that's the biggest piece, right? If we don't talk to our kids about and acknowledge different identities and different relationships that exist, then we're not giving them a fair shake at what we know is happening in the world. And so, as young as they are, we need to be talking about, well, Joyce and Jackie got married, and that was, when my kids were little, we called it a webbing. Because there wasn't a name, so we called it a webbing, so that they were coming together in this web. And so many years later, when my partner and I had a webbing, my kids kind of laughed because all of them were like, "Why are we doing this? We've been living this for years." And I said, "It's really important to create these memories as a family, and it's like having a webbing." But they're all like adult people, and they get that. But it was funny to be able to refer back to that language that we knew when my kids were little. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be on this kind of forum with folks, and to be starting to have these conversations more and more, and we'd be happy to figure out how to continue that in some way, shape, or form as things move forward. So thank you both for that.
And I very quickly want to echo exactly what Erin said. This is such an affirming moment for myself, but also for everybody else. We are seen, and visibility is, we want all to be seen. So creating that moment with your family, your child wants to be seen, you see them, you hear them, and you work together. So thank you for taking your time to be here.
And thank you, Elizabeth and Erin, for taking the time to be with us this evening. to have this really very important conversation. And thank you all for joining us. I hope you found the conversation helpful and insightful. You will be receiving an email in a few short days with a survey. I do encourage you to please take the time to fill it out. Your feedback is important to us. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you for coming.